But when I realized this, I tell people, I said, imagine this, you have your in your room or your house, and thieves broke in. They came in through a window. They broke into your window and came in whilst you were asleep. And, ransacked your place. They stole all what you had. So you woke up and in your confused state, you walk out through the same window that they came into your room. How does that benefit you? That door that they open, that now you are walking out to go because you're so confused and you're still trying to make sense of what happened to you when all of your valuable things are gone. And you said, you created a way for me to walk through, come out of my room. So what you did actually benefited me. I don't see it that way. But before, that was what I was told. So I cherished it. And so when I came here first, I didn't see anything wrong. This is a perfect system. And so it was great for me. But I think once I began to, all of these things happen, I realized how much trauma that I was carrying. And this is not like, say, trauma in terms of the way I think people think traditional psychological kinds of trauma where you will need counseling, you need things. But I realized that epistemically, the knowledge form upon which my socialization was built on through education in even churches and all kinds of stuff were rooted in this, cognitive injustice framework that framed the narrative, not to help me see how I have been disadvantaged, how I have been robbed of not only, I think, my humanity, but my identity, my cultural sense of being and everything, and just to reject everything about me and to accept the fact that, yes, colonialism brought me Christianity, it brought me civilization, it brought me this. And so everything that it continued to do under the Euro-American modernity, it's for my benefit. And so I think once that occurred to me, when I figured it in that perspective, I think it gave me a new surge and a new drive to be able to look at what it is that I should have gotten in my education authentically that I didn't get. And so I began, it was unfortunate that a lot of these things started close, I was right about to even towards the end of my PhD. And so now I'm still on the journey, decolonizing some of the things that I have, learned over the years. I am now beginning to deconstruct them so that I will be able to, through the different ways that I am understanding things, I can reconstruct the way that I think knowledge should have been presented to me as I was growing up and how that should have shaped the way I think and how I relate to people around me, people that are both Africans and non-Africans. I think it's important. So that's, I think, a little bit of the journey so far.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned so much, and all of it was great. The latter part of what you were saying focused on you still on a journey to decolonizing your education and your experiences. You mentioned how that process of being socialized and being formed in Ghana traumatized you educationally. And when you went to America, some of those things became a little bit more salient in your experiences. Now, let's talk a little bit to the person who's the, let's say the 16, the 17, the 25-year-old that's in Ghana or even somewhere else in Africa. And they're hearing about this stuff for the first time, particularly around decolonization and colonization. And let's stick in the context of Ghana. They're saying, you know what? The way that we are in Ghana, it would have been better to stay colonized by the British. And the stuff that you're saying was so long ago that it doesn't impact me now. We all know that it does, but let's break it down to that level. Let's talk about how that legacy of colonization is still prevalent in today's society in Ghana. What are some of the ways that it's prevalent?
I think some of the way that is prevalent, that you can see that And it's now, I think it's more like, when I was talking about the cultural trauma, the way it's prevalent, most Ghanaians in particular, and I think across even other Africans, because I interact with different folks and other kinds of stuff now, I see that we tend to equate like success to association with white people, association with the Western world. That's one. The other one is now the average Ghanaian, the names, the local name that we have, that's one way. You ask the average person, sometimes they don't know what is the Ghanaian name and what does that mean. So, names are historical archives, so names are things that when you mention somebody's name in the way that the culture was, their name can instantly evoke a particular, event that occurred, or something that is in the family lineage, or something that is within the community, or something that had happened. It could be good or bad, and all of those things. Or you mention that name that can bring you a memory of maybe an ancestor who was in a family who passed, but possessed certain characteristics or qualities. So those things just all the time makes history easily accessible and available to shape identity and stuff. But now we are gradually not finding meaning in any of these things. That's another way that you see that thing impact us. Then the other thing is this notions about dependency on Western foreign aid and all kinds of stuff. You have this, when you think of the average person, it's not everybody, but most people, even including me, before I came here, the idea was, if I travel, man, all my worries and my things are over. I'm going to be like, everything is going to be great. I have some friends, who still, sometimes I tell them some issues and they don't believe. I remember I had this particular guy, he said, even if he will ever step foot in American soil and die, he will be satisfied. As soon as he gets to America and he dies, he will be fulfilled, And then you have this idea also that if you can, only be well or do that well, you have to travel, Then even in church, most of the time when people are, somebody wants to give you prophecy, you will travel, you will fly business class, you will get a visa. It's there, okay? And then the idea that even if God is going to bless you, God is going to give you a helper who is a Westerner, who is like, who is of European descent. It's like when I was growing up, and in most of the areas, like most now, and when I was in middle school or even elementary school, anytime you will see that most of our old mothers, grandmothers are in a rush to go to church, like oftentimes this Catholic church, I'm going to church, Father is coming today, Father is coming today. That means a white person is showing up, so they are going to get blessing, they're going to get this. There's this urgency with which we react when we think about foreigners or people who are in there. And even us, like I remember literally when I had I came home, and after school, some of the way that even my own family, I think the kinds of the reception they gave me and everything. So I thanked them and I said, I really appreciate you for this, but some of them I had to reject it because it doesn't. So, and one of the things that I said is that the fact that if I've traveled or I've been here, that doesn't mean that I should come and turn upside down everything that exists that I knew culturally. And so I don't need to take up the position of the elder in the family because of the fact that I have a PhD or I have this thing, or, some people call it, you have this certificate that is a white man's approval. But I think as a character, but So I see this even in families, even among sometimes friends, people all the time, everybody think that I'm here, I have a lot of money. So I get a lot of people, both family and outside family. Everybody think that I'm so rich. I should come and buy a house, build a house, this money, bring that, this school fees. Even it's that. So these are all the same mentality that it's a sign of the legacy of the colonialism, because I didn't know how rich Ghana is until I stepped out of Ghana. You know, I come to Ghana and I have all kinds of ideas. Now, yes, people will say, well, because you came to school here. Part of it is that, yes, because even the discovery and my own self-discovery journey I have been on is because of the experiences that I've had. But I've also known a lot of folks who came here and they have done it and they still maintain that same mentality. So it's not just on, and most of even the things that I've come to know and why I don't learn them in classroom. I didn't learn them in the classrooms, like in the traditional American educational classroom, because they don't teach these things.
Eric, I'll say this real quick. What you just said, you know, you can put that person with that colonial mind in a different society, but unless they choose, then they will still have that colonized mind. And I think the evidence is now, when I say this, it is the honest to God truth. You were one of the first one of the first Ghanaians that I met that even had this same level of thinking. You know, like most Ghanaians that I met, and not in a disrespectful way, but it was just like the trajectory was, because that socialization that we don't deal with Black people so much was there. And then it was like, I'm here to get education, to make money. Anything outside of that, I don't care about. And I think the damage in that is it creates not only a narrative, but a reality that even puts us against one another. Because I was telling someone this the other day, when we don't know the history, we can't appreciate what we have. For the African immigrant coming to the States, when they don't know the history, they'll say, not always, but sometimes they never be, you know, Black folks are lazy, they're this, they're that. Yeah. And look at me, right? I came from poverty. Now I'm doing very well in society. But one of the things sometimes they don't understand is that it was Black folks and slaves that built the foundations of the nations, fought, bled, and died, so that institutions that you benefit from can now be open and accessible to you.
Yeah.
And so many Black people in America, particularly African Americans, have dealt with structural, implicit, and all kind of other forms of racism that we know how to recognize it and deal with it and be sustained and even move throughout society and be successful despite of it, versus the average person who's not used to being in that type of racialized context. When they come, it can be happening to them, and it's not always explicit expressions like derogatory, discriminatory terms. It can be things like people stealing your research, people profiting off your ideas.
Yeah.
You're the one who did all the work, but when you look at the paper, someone else's name is on it.
Yeah.
And then if the person is approached by that, the mentality is you should just be grateful that you even had a hand in contributing.
Yeah. And I think that's the issues about this racialized, you know, task or racialized labor, where, you know, right from the onset, before the founding of, particularly in the US, Black people's work have all the time been, even when we think of Egyptian civilization, Greek civilizations, and all of the things, Africans are underneath it, the root of it, but it's you know, switched and made it as if now they are coming to teach us something, you know. And it's one of the things, I think somewhere last year or so I saw was like European Union was supporting Ghana, and they were planting, they said they planted about 5,000 trees, and they were making a big deal out of this. And I said, look at this. It's the whole mess. You know, when I was in the village, because also I think the other thing that I think now a lot of the things make sense to me. I grew up in the village before I came to Accra or, you know, go to school, because, and so I knew how we learned, my grandparents and stuff, how the forest was protected. Okay. And there were certain days, sometimes we will not go to farm, we won't go to the riverside. And so all of those things are important things for the ecosystem. You know, you wouldn't just cut tree just like that. And so right at that point, the kinds of the worldview was this understanding of the biodiversity. And so knowing that everything that exists on the face of the earth is useful. If you understand it, you know how you use it. But now in the name of, you know, colonial mentality and white, you know, Euro modernity, it's all about mastery. So master everything in the environment instead of to live in harmony with the earth and everything in the planet, and how we can live a symbiotic relationship. And so we have now I go to my village, and all the water bodies that we used to go there and get water from and everything, they're all gone. They're dried up. Okay. This were some of the things that most of the generation before, I knew some of the village, some people there lived like 120 years, 110, 100, I mean, 90, I mean, 100, I'm sorry, 119, you know, like, but now all of those water bodies and the forest and everything is gone. But it's because it's linked to some of these things. And so now we got European Union come in and say, right, they are now coming to teach us how to maintain a green environment. It doesn't make sense. But I think, like you said, because one of the things that I've realized is that we don't talk about the history. And because we don't talk about the history, we don't know how it has traumatized us and how we continue to live it. We think of independence. Sometimes you talk to people, I've spoken to a lot of people, sometimes it becomes a heated argument that, oh, we should forget about this, it's past, it's gone. But people don't realize, imagine, close about what, 360 or something years of transatlantic slave trade. What that thing does is it obstructed the ability of the people to think in terms of themselves and a system and a structure that was meant for them, an economy that was based on their own design for their own people and for their own interests. It obstructed that to the process of, you know, learning how to make sure you are safe, you are secure. And so it made them to develop an adaptive patterns to life about how to survive, but not how to thrive. And that trauma continue. You know, after that, we call it colonialism, but colonialism is just a continuation of the whole thing, because when transatlantic slave trade was abolished, it was not abolished because they wanted to stop, because they wanted to use the Africans to still extract the resources that are in there. So the way the Berlin Conference happened is something like the way the plantations were in the America here, and the way it was in the Caribbeans and Cuba and all of the places where these were working in. So it's colonialism just had a name, but it wasn't that different from the way in many cases we had the plantation and slaves and then the plantation owners. It's the version on the African continent was that, yes, it was even still the Africans were being used mostly, but it was designed to still ensure that the same group of people are exploiting and benefiting from Africans, both on the continent and across the continent. And so you add that, what that also did, I think, with through the transatlantic slave trade, that's why I think it brought this trauma and the colonial legacy add up to it, because, you know, where white people will form alliance with local tribal leaders and make them feel like you should see this one as not part of you. And so that way, when you consider somebody as an outsider, it's easier for you to think about more treatment on them. And in Ghana, this thing we say, so when it's not you and it's somebody you think is an outsider, you think it's a tree, so you can just catch it away. You know, And that's the mentality that thing cemented in the minds of a lot of the traditional leaders at the time. And through the supply of the gun and the European product and everything. So then people began to see, oh, so European are the sources of these kinds of things. So if I want them, I need to respond to them in this way and that way. And so it diverted our ideas of economics to one of generating something within our own context for our own, with our own interest, to one of, capture and sell under the power of the gun, under all kinds of fraud, deception, and other kinds of stuff. And so you have this, when people develop that skill, they build that skills over time. That's why after the transatlantic slave trade was abolished, there were instances where local chiefs and local, elites didn't want to give up because that is now their source of living and they didn't know any other way. So then when colonialism came, those who had slaves and who couldn't sell them, they now made them to be servants, to still work for them and get product that they can sell to the colonial market and still make it for them. And so you think about that and you think about even human trafficking today. It's that same legacy. But people will talk about human trafficking as modern day slavery, but don't make some of these connections and want to deal human trafficking in a decontextualized manner, don't really talk so much about the history of the transatlantic slave trade and the colonial legacy that followed it, And so you have this idea where now most of our people think, yes, it's going to be white people to help us to do this, to do that, to do this. But it's because we don't talk about the history. We don't know how we were impacted by it, how it has disoriented us, and how it continues to, do the same way that it's doing. But the average person, you tell them this, they'll tell you, oh, this is history. Even granted, Ghana gained independence when it's not even a century yet. And you're talking about something that is not just 1 century, close to about what? Over, 400 centuries of legacy. And when you think of cultural trauma, it is not something that, it doesn't come out particularly in the lives of people who directly experience it. It follows the generations after them, So I think for me, once I recognized this, that was when I was a little bit disappointed in my education. And I am, because they still have this same thing. I have some folks I speak to today. I have some cousins and I have that who are in school, and they still, the other day I was talking to my cousin and I was asking him about this. He was still telling me the same advantages and disadvantages of colonialism. So it's shaping our education, our economics, our politics, and everything. And I think once we're doing this, one of the things that I think people often don't realize is that your knowledge, the outcome of your development initiative is going to produce sustainability and something that is impactful to a degree that the knowledge that grounded, it's so. But our current system, the kinds of the knowledge that we are getting, upon which we are thinking of development, they are Eurocentric. And Eurocentric frame, epistemological framework, doesn't have anything that is to guarantee the development of the African and the persons of the African descent. So it's not going to work. We're still grounded in that same, structure and epistemological framework. Is not going to happen.
So then the question someone may be asking at this point is, so then what can we do? So why not just, if I'm in Ghana, why not just get my money anyhow and survive and not worry about these things? Or if I'm a Ghanaian in the States, I may be saying, well, you have actually attributed to my worldview that says, why not just take care of myself, because none of this is going to change and it doesn't matter. what I want you to do is address that question and then talk a little bit more about the 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 programs and initiatives and the research that you're doing, because you're doing some amazing work to actually bridge this gap with university students in Ghana as well as in the States. So I want you to address that question and then talk about the work that you're doing with those university students around this anti-racism, decolonization frameworks.
All right. So I think, yeah, it's not that it can work, but if we change the knowledge system and the knowledge pattern, it can work. And so that's not something like it's an inherent issue. It's more of a design, because I think the issue is until we recognize that as a people, we are wounded and culturally we are, I think, we were to call this that the difference Nguwa Chengo actually makes between Africans and African in the diaspora is that the diasporans were uprooted from their culture, and so them, the root, it's difficult. But then those on the continent too, they are experiencing cultural starvation. So it's at a place. So what we need to do is to begin to nourish some of these things. So when something is being starved and you don't nourish it, over time, you're going to lose it. And so we have some opportunity to try to bring that nourishment. That's where decolonization becomes important, so that we are beginning to the process that heal us and that restore us back into ourselves. We need that restoration to our authentic self that will position us to know who we are and what we are up for, what we are capable of doing, and to do that. So, and to do that, I think that's where, again, the history becomes important, not only for the healing, but also to rediscover some of these pieces. And so some of the work that I do when I do racial socialization, racial history, and part of that is to go into the history didn't begin with slavery. Prior to slavery. And then even the early, when you learn the people who, the early experiences of the enslaved when they came here, I think when you learn this experience, you know how much of Africa they brought with them. And over time, as the conditions, got tougher and other things, they also adapted to the patterns and in design ways for coping and to adapt and also engage in some level of transformation. Okay. And I think one of the things that I think like Africans will benefit us a lot as we are thinking about development, but unfortunately we don't do this. If Africans can understand this history prior to, and then when the enslaved Africans came to the West, how they lived and they learned the history. Most of these Africans, now what we have, like, for instance, in the US, African Americans or the Black communities are all from the different tribes of the sub-Saharan African countries that are now countries as a result of the Berlin Conference. And so in the context of their adversity, some of them even didn't speak the same language. They became connected. They forged family, they forged communities. And that's how they took care of one another to survive slavery. So when you think about family, you think about community. I don't know any other group that know what that looks like than the African-American community. Those when in the heydays of the slavery. So if we were to look that will help us to really see the authentic culture that they brought, but then the adaptive one that they took as a result of the slavery conditions. So those things will help us to take stock. And then, learn how to disengage from the ones that are slavery-like, that are culturally traumatic. And then pick up the ones that are thriving, that they brought, that have also been enhanced, as a result of experience and stuff. that we can begin to use that to really, shape what knowledge, constitute sources of knowledge that we can use to educate ourselves, educate our children, and also foster healing. Then the other thing that also will provide us is that when you look at most of the things, the idea that most Africans in particular travel to the West thinking that they're coming to look for opportunity. If most of them know that the so-called opportunities are actually at the backbones of Blacks, and that the lack of the opportunities that they don't have, that is even the push factor that is driving all of us out, is also connected to this same legacy. I think it will change the game, because then that will begin to bring so many forms of contradictions about what we know and what we have been told about ourselves. Right now, I guarantee you, if you go to Ghana or you go on the street or you ask the average Ghanaian, why do you think we are poor, our conditions are this? A lot of them tell what the Western world has said, oh, because we are poor, because we are lazy, because we don't think, because we don't do. But these are the theories that explain a lot of the things. Oh, because we are corrupt, oh, we are this. But when you compare these theories and you observe the reality, see how every day somebody is struggling to make a living. Somebody is selling on the street. Somebody is doing this. How can lazy people will be trying to do anything that they could possibly do just to take care of family? These are not lazy people, but the theories have made us to think that, oh, because it's this, because we are that. And then we think of even the corruption. I think that's one of the things that has, also done to us is that many of us are living our life, not authentic life. Many of us don't know what our purposes are, but most of us are living to show that we can also achieve what white people have achieved. We can also like white people. So most of us idea of success, idea of well, is to show that they can drive in the car that the white people drive. They can
Toyota.
Yes, they can fly on the same business class with white people. So once they do that, that's a success for them. So when they get into leadership position or any other thing, that's what they want to do. By the time they accomplish that, they have diverted the resources and everything that was meant for the collective to achieve this goal that the system has set. The white supremacy has declared as, signs for success and everything. But once we go into some of these things, we begin to see that, frankly, we are not made to live our life to prove to white people because they are not our maker. They are not the people who design, who decide, or who give us the metrics for what success looks like for us. And so we getting into those spaces, I think it will help us to reorient the way we live with one another and what our life ought to be. We're not to live our life to please the Western world, but to be fulfilled in who we are and what we are caught up for, to ourselves, to one another, and in our community. I think those are important. And I think because of also, we don't go through the history. Like for instance, when the name, earlier on I was talking about the name of a thing is as a result of the experiences that are connected to it. So look at, you've been in Ghana now. When you hear Oboruni, Ghana, the name Oboruni is used in a very, as if it is a very like an ideal world. When somebody is talking about, oh, their marriage is nice, they equate it to Oboruni's marriage. This nice. They equate it to this my baby there, this my baby is Oboruni. But if we were to be critical, pay attention to the history, the word is a derogatory name that you want to be associated with, but that is part of this. And so if we get into the history and we realize that actually, this is not a term I want to celebrate. This is not a term I want to give eulogy to, but that's what we do. And it's because we don't pay attention to the history, because after Nananum learned that these people came here with an intent not to ensure our progress, but they came here to ensure our underdevelopment. So because literally the way Ghana, when you say Oboruni, like if somebody knows you and say, oh, Eric, Obebo from where Brofo, Obebo from, that means this guy, it's all about your underdevelopment. It's not about your progress. So be mindful of him. That's why Nana said these people are Abrofo. You know, so like if we pay attention to our ancestors well and the experiences, they are using the experiences to give us a lessons way forward so that we won't make some of the mistakes that they made. But because we don't pay attention to, we are still flowing with it. And these days, everybody wants to actually be celebrated as Oboruni. So that's part. Now to the other thing. So, you know, so part of it, I know that a lot of this work, you know, it's in the epistemic realm, like the game of the mind. I think most of the scholars have really shown this, that it almost like colonialism invaded our mind. It's like somebody said, it's almost like they took our brain out and inserted the one that they want us to think about. And the process occur is through the education and the Christian, the religious principles and doctrine that they introduce into us. And so when we go to the history, it will help us to rediscover some of the ones that are being starved right now and begin to nourish them, include them in our education, our curriculum, and learn the history, not so much about the white history, but the Black history in general, particularly the Blacks in the diaspora. I think they provide really great opportunity for a lot of us to correct a lot of the cultural misunderstanding that we have. And it also unveils the level of cultural trauma that not only Black people, but almost everybody, but white people in particular. And one example I think is this, because when most people think of white people or this, how they do things and stuff, it is just also another trauma, which is an activation of the racial contract. You know, we know, I mean, this idea that, oh, Europeans and they are white. There's nothing white about this thing. It's just a frame of mindset that are coming from an ideology from dead white men who wanted to, you know, by their profit interest and everything, initiated this idea to divide people to ensure smooth accumulation of capital, you know. And so they designed this and said, well, we're going to call these people white right after Bacon Rebellion after 1676. So the first time these things came into the law in the US in particular was 1680, when those who were of British descent and European descent who look like this are called white. But the idea is this: it was conferred on people, and the terms of it is that if you subscribe to the demands of being a white, we will not patrol you like we will do this. We will not maltreat you. We won't do so. As long as you are you subscribe to the racial contract, you are guaranteed certain level of access, protection, resources, and symbols. Okay. And so what we see today, even with the idea that white people, it also distorted their thinking to see that their safety, their security, and everything is guaranteed as long as they hold on to the racial contract that uphold this ideology that white is the norm and it has to be this way, you know. And so for them, it's a trauma that all the time when you are thinking about making structural changes, most of them they don't know any other thing other than, unless they are in charge, life doesn't have meaning. And so once you begin to think about changes, then they are like resistant, similar to how, you know, educated elite in Africa, right after transatlantic slave trade, when they were thinking about making, you know, the abolition of the transatlantic slave trade, they didn't want to give up because their source of livelihood have come to depend on that. And so you see that as a society, we have built on the relationship that are based on, I mean, dehumanizing others. It's a very dysfunctional system. So our relationships are also dysfunctional. And on the basis of that, our knowledge system are also dysfunctional. So we build a system culturally, politically, economically that are also dysfunctional. And they are maintaining this whole process. So that's why it has become so difficult, I think, to really make some changes. But as difficult as it is, I think the cost is greater without doing anything, you know, compared to allowing it to be the way it is.
So let me ask you one real question. I know you got to go, but let me ask you this final question, because I think this is important, particularly in the Ghanaian context, where one scholar I heard said that no matter where you go in the world, Africans are incurably religious. And when you come to a place like Ghana, and we are statistically overwhelmingly Christian, but yet you mentioned earlier that it is in the churches, not just the churches, but a lot of times in our churches, where these colonial types of perceptions and realities persist and are often exacerbated. My final question would be, what is the role of the African church in this work around anti-racism? And let's talk particularly about or even decolonizing our faith.
So I think it's the same, because what the church, yes, the Africans, actually, I wouldn't say religious, spiritual, but colonialism and whiteness has made it religious, and from the spiritual standpoint, Africans didn't see God outside of themselves, and it's like God around, God within, God interacting with the human in relationships. So like in Ghana, that's why there's this idea, we say that, nobody teaches a child who God is, because by experience, the child will know that God is intricately connected with their life, not only on Sunday when they go to church or when they do this, that God is, and then when they're going to school, they're going to farm, they're doing everything, and that they can relate to God anytime, anywhere. Okay, so with that, but then the colonial idea of the church came in and said, brought scientific religion to us that made us feel like God is outside us, that you have to do something to earn his blessing, something to earn his glory, and all of these things, and so it's, and Steve Biko of South Africa, he said that they brought this campaign of emotional terrorism onto us, where we begin to feel like if you don't do this, there's this God who is watching you and will burn you and your soul with fire. So it's that. And so now you see that most of our churches and stuff have capitalized on that.
It's true.
And extort people and say this. Now, that's one of the things that as I evolve into this, I began to also build my faith. Now, I am somebody who, I don't consider myself religious. I'm a spiritual person, and I believe in God. I engage with God, and I see God speak to me in a lot of ways, the thing that I do and sometimes what I do. We talk about this, my faith. But reading the Bible, some of the things that I've come to see, particularly when it comes to money, the colonial idea has made the church focus so much on money, and that is purely exploitation. Granted, yes, if you teach people to understand, the people understand the principle, and God speak to their heart, do this, people will do it. But when you make people to terrorize them emotionally, that if they don't do this, this is going to happen, or they have to do this in order to do that. And yet we talk about the fact that the blood of Jesus, when I read the Bible, the way I understand the Bible, it shows me that Jesus presented his blood to God. And on the account of that blood, he negotiated a salvation for us. And on that account, so Jesus said, anything you will ask of the Father in my name, that's what he's going to do. Now, it's like, so somebody has given you a blank check. And he said, when anytime you have a request, write your name on this check and go and cash it. Do you have to go and give another person money before this check can be cashed? You know, that's how now the church is. So it making even the idea of the blood of Jesus out of the equation and making it, you have to use money to earn God's favor, to earn God's blessing, to do this, to do that. And it's all because of what this thing, the idea of colonialism brought to us. It made us to see God as an outsider and to see God as somebody who doesn't exist in people. Because like, if we think of God dwells in you, he dwells in me. And the Bible is even clear. I think the scripture in 1 John 5, 1 John 3 or so, he said that, how can you claim to say you know God when you don't treat my children? Why? Because he said, all of you that are the children of the Most High God, you are God, because you carry God's image. And so how then will, if I see you as God, I see myself as God dwells in me, and I respect God, how then would I try to exploit you? But the colonial idea had made us to see that God lives somewhere, so we have to do this to earn his favor. And then it's also tied to capitalism. And one of the things rooted in that idea is that of this idea of predestination, that God had already predestined people to be this way and that way. And your success, which is also part of this colonial idea, is that your success, which is an indication of how much cash you have, all this material possession, is a guarantee that your salvation is intact. You know, and so then people don't care about how they get the money, but they will get it as a sign that God had blessed them. But that's not how God works. So that has become something that I think we see, like we think that is our culture. And it's not only in church, like traditionally, I think there's this culture in the Volta region area, the Trocosi system. I don't know if you have heard that. When you read the history behind it, people think it's the culture of the area there. It's not. It's something that during those slave trade, the certain tribes in there who had access to, engaging with white and had guns and things, were able to sell people. And the traditional rulers at the time, the priests, their relevance was declining. So they realized that, oh, in this economy now, how much people you have, and if you relate with white people and this, then you are counted relevance. So they also began to say that, okay, now, if we also offer our services in the community by virtue of helping to resolve conflict, helping people with disease, or helping to address issues of infertility or other things, we would demand human being, and female in particular, for as our prize, so that this female, by taking advantage of the reproductive resource of the woman, they also have babies and have more children under their control. And over time, throughout the 18th century and to the 19th century, that thing practice became normalized. So now the subsequent generation made this, and they use this to terrorize people, that if to continue that, the gods are going to punish them. But it's all rooted in this history. And you see the same thing in church and stuff. And I had, I think myself, one experience that one of the reasons that even, I think, under me, part of the thing that I live, I remember when I was down with university. I was doing my national service. And I was in my office one day. I had somebody had come to me, and this person was like old enough, like my mom. And she said, here, this is how we do it. She was showing me how, if we were running a program or something, we can talk, arrange with hotels and other people and organizing workshop, and how we can inflate the budget. So she said all of these things to me. And I said, well, according to the Bible that I read, I said, my Bible says that I was reading this King James verse. I quoted to her. I said, as the partridge brings forth earth and does not hatch it, so is he who makes money shall die in the midst of it if the money is not good. And she said, is this in the Bible? I said, yes. So that's the thing. But the way I think our Christianity is going, even if you sit down and you read the Bible with the guidance of the Holy Spirit, you see that a lot of the things are off. And Frank Fanon said that these people didn't come to teach us God. They came to teach us the ways of the white man. And that ways are exploitative. That ways are paternalistic. It's a patriarchy at work. You know, and that's what has become something. I know because of what at least by my background and my experience, my relationship with God, I know there are some people who are genuine about God. But even when people get the spiritual realities from God and they are translating that, the cultural lenses with which they translate spiritual realities into the world even corrupt how they carry they bring the message. And it's all, you know, rooted in these legacies of the way, I think, epistemologically, how cognitively we are wired to process information and think about things and interpret them. So that's, I think it's how I think the church, there's so much room, so much need for decolonization. These days, people even read the Bible and they talk about, oh, the Greek version, the Hebrew version, and all of the things. But it's interestingly, in as much as those things are good, I don't condemn them. But one of the things that even the Master himself, the Jesus himself said, he said that the Spirit of truth, when he comes, he will lead us, he will show the truth to us, and he will lead us into the truth. He didn't say, when you get the Hebrew version, when you get the Greek version, when you get the Aramaic version, you will know the truth. But that's what we do. So wow. It comes back, I think, to we have a lot of work to do to engage in this decolonial framework that will help us interpret the scriptures, the Bible, even in our own context. You know, when I speak the tree and the way you talk about certain things, you know how the tree is. There are one word in tree, you can get so many phrases for it, but sometimes you don't have a similar one. So some of those things, you write them in English, sometimes you lose the originality and the power that those words carry. But I think we don't realize what we have. So now, even most people, particularly in Accra, feel shy speaking Twi.
Wow. Man, listen, I'm telling you, there's so much knowledge that you've shared, and I know you guys watching, I'm sure you guys were somewhere taking notes, because, you know, it's almost just like you got a lecture in Pan-African Studies, anti-colonial framework and all that, because of this channel and because of the great work of people like Eric. And I want to say that the thing that encouraged me most is when you look at all the problems that we're having on the continent and just even in the world, it can get discouraging. But when you look at people like yourself who are not just working in the classroom, but working outside of the classroom to bridge the gap between those of us in the diaspora, because you're a God-centered person who is focusing on understanding who we are and our narratives, and then putting us together because of those narratives and making sure that the next generation can create the change that they also want to see. It's empowering. So all that to say, thank you for the work that you're doing. And, you know, we look forward to seeing you next time in Ghana. And for the folks that's out there watching, listen, I'm so excited that you took some time to be with me today. As always, when you see this information, I know you like it, so make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you like this video. Make sure you share it.